الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجن من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
My brothers, this is just one of our Gateway to Scholarship students, mashallah, a 17-year-old, mashallah, recites the Quran so eloquently, so beautifully. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him barakat in his ilm and amal. Without any further delay, I would like to invite three students to come and praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by reciting the Qasida Burda, Adnan Ahmed, Shahab Muhammad, and Muhammad Akhtar. MashaAllah, a beautiful performance of the Qasida Burda Sharif by, again, another few of our Gateway to Scholarship students. Allah bless them and Allah grant them barakat in their ilm and amal. Without wasting any further time, I would like to invite our main speaker, the first of the two main speakers, Allama Arshad Misbahi sahb, to come and bless us with their words of wisdom and advice about how we should spend the month of Ramadan. Our brothers, honestly, the month of Ramadan has so many blessings. You know, it's like a bargain bucket deal for the entire month. And so many of us, after the first 2-3 days, we start to waste Ramadan. Our Taraweeh, the first 2-3 days, we're reading them fine, and then we start to waste Taraweeh. Even some people, they stop fasting. Some people stop praying their first Salah. So Ramadan is a very special month, and inshallah we'll hear more about it from Allama Arshad Misbahi sahb. Narai Takbir, Narai Risalat, Narai Tahqiq, Narai Haydari, Ulama Ahl Sunnah.
الحمد لله الذي فضل سيدنا ومولانا محمدا صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم على العالمين جميعا وأقامه يوم القيامة للمذنبين المتلوثين الخطائين الهالكين شفيعا فصلى الله تعالى وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى كل من هو محبوب ومرضي لديه صلاة تبقى وتدوم بدوام الملك الحي القيوم ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله بالهدى ودين الحق أرسله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. قال الله تبارك وتعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. فقال الله تبارك وتعالى يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. صلى الله على النبي الأمي وآله صلى الله عليه وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا رسول الله. الله رب محمد صلى عليه وسلم نحن عباد محمد صلى عليه وسلم. हम तो माइल व करम हैं कोई साइल ही नहीं. हम तो माइल व करम हैं, कोई साइल ही नहीं। राह दिखलाए किसे, राह रवे मंजिल ही नहीं। दिन लाहव में खोना तुझे, शब सुबह तक सोना तुझे। दिन लाहव में खोना तुझे, शब सुबह तक सोना तुझे। शर्मे नबी खौफे खुदा, ये भी नहीं वो भी नहीं। रिश्ते खुदा खाया किया, रिश्ते खुदा खाया किया। फरमान हक ताला किया, शुक्रे करम कर से सजा। ये भी नहीं वो भी नहीं। Alhamdulillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala, by the grace and mercy of Allah, we congregate this evening in this beautiful Masjid Sultania in Brierfield, in this beautiful event. Inshallah, the topic that I have been given by the organizations of this masjid is to speak about the importance of the coming month of Ramadanul Mubarak. What should be our mindset? How do we welcome this month? What are the virtues and merits of this very honorable month of the Islamic calendar? There are so many dimensions and perspectives of the importance of Ramadanul Mubarak. And there is no doubt for each and every one of us as a Muslim, our Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam is the best role model. The best example for the believers, the greatest human being that we should be emulating and trying to follow his guidance and his teachings. Listen to this beautiful narration from the works of Hadith, in which it is mentioned that one of the practices of our Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam, his sunnah, his way, was that as soon as the month of Rajab commenced, when the new moon of Rajab was sighted, our Nabi alayhi salatu wassalam would make a special dua. And what was that dua? The dua wordings are, Allahumma barik lana fi Rajab wa Sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan. Oh Allah, grant us blessings in Rajab and Sha'ban and lead us to the month of Ramadanul Mubarak. This is one indication from hadith of the love that our Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam had for the month of Ramadan. 2 months before it actually began, the whole month of Rajab, the whole month of Sha'ban, you find the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam making dua to Allah that he is honored and blessed with the month of Ramadan al-Mubarak. ये हदीस पाक हम सब के लिए बेहतरीन हिदायत है। इसमें हमारे लिए दर्स है कि हमारे नबी अलैहिस्सलातु वस्सलाम को रमज़ानुल मुबारक से कितना लगाव था, कितना प्यार था, कैसी चाहत थी कि अभी रमज़ानुल मुबारक को शुरू होने में 2 महीने बाकी हैं और सरकार अल्लाह की बारगाह में दुआ करते हैं कि अल्लाह हमें रमज़ानुल मुबारक का महीना अता फरमा। वेरी ब्यूटीफुल इंडिकेशन, significant guidance for the believers. Start preparing for Ramadan, mentally, physically. Get ready for this blessed, special guest of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala looks for excuses to forgive the believers. He loves us. In one way or another, He wants to forgive the Ummah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And one beautiful means that we should be seeking forgiveness from the Creator that He has granted us is in the form of the month of Ramadan al-Mubarak. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "Awwaluhu rahmatun, wa awsatuhu maghfiratun, wa akhiruhu itqun minan nar." The first 10 days of Ramadan, especially for the mercy of Allah. The next 10 days, especially for the forgiveness of Allah. And the last 9 or 10 days to seek freedom from the fire of Jahannam. So it's an honor for the believers that they are granted Ramadan every year by the grace and mercy of Allah. So value this time. This 29 or 30 days, inshallah, that we will be entering very soon in the next 10 days or so. Prepare yourselves. Ask Allah to give you tawfiq and ability to make it the best Ramadan of your life so far. And ensure you do your absolute best. Every form of ibadat, every form of piety, every form of seeking the pleasure of Allah, make the most of it. Don't waste your time. Time is precious. Time is wealth. Time is a ni'mat of Allah. Time is a bounty of Allah. And on the day of judgment, Allah will question each and every one of us of the bounties and blessings that He has granted us. Allah says in Surah Al-Takasur, ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. कहो Subhanallah, और ऊंचा कहे Subhanallah. ثُمَّ لَتُسْأَلُنَّ يَوْمَئِذٍ عَنِ النَّعِيمِ. And on the day of judgment, you shall definitely be questioned about every bounty and favor of Allah, every ni'mat of Allah, every blessing of Allah. So this is the last ayat of Surah Al-Takasur. Then you have the next surah, Surah Al-Asr, one of the smallest, shortest surahs of the Quran. Surah Al-Asr begins, as you just heard, Allah begins it with, Wal-Asr, by the time, Innal insana lafi khusr. Indeed, man is in great loss. Illa alladhina amanu وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Allah says all men are losers but those who are blessed with Iman, good deeds, those who advise each other to the truth, and those who invite each other to patience. Only 4 exceptions, 4 qualities that are needed for you to be successful both in this life and in the next life. Allah ने इस सूरह मुबारका की इब्तिदा कसम के तौर पे याद फरमाई और अल्लाह ने ज़माने की कसम याद फरमाई, वक्त की कसम याद फरमाई। वहां सूरत तकासुर में क्या फरमाया? सुम्मा लतुसअलुन्ना यौमइदिन अनिन नईम। और यहां इब्तिदा हो रही है वल आस्र, जमाने की कसम, वक्त की कसम। And आला हज़रत इमाम अहमद रज़ा रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु मुजद्दिद ऑफ इस्लाम ट्रांसलेट्स उस ज़माने महबूब की कसम, उस ज़माने, because the best of all times is the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. So time is precious, brothers. Use this time that Allah gave you in this life wisely. Every second counts. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala will bless us once again, inshallah, with Ramadanul Mubarak every day, every night, every hour, every minute, every second. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if my ummah knew the value and worth of Ramadan, they would wish Ramadan never comes to an end. अगर मेरी उम्मत को इसकी कदर पता चल जाए कि अल्लाह ने इसमें किस कदर बरकतें और रहमतें रखी है, तो हर एक की ये ख्वाहिश और तमन्ना और आरज़ू हो कि ये माह मुबारक कभी खत्म ही ना हो, कभी इख्तिताम को ना पहुंचे। इसलिए अच्छा, आकिल, दाना, समझदार इंसान वो होता है जो हमेशा आने वाले अय्याम की, साआत की, महीनों की, सालों की तैयारी करता रहता है। तैयारी करनी हमने। अभी इत्तेफाक से मैंने ज़हन बनाया था कि इंशाअल्लाह इस आयत पे गुफ्तगू करूंगा। मैं जब आपकी मस्जिद में आया हूं, किबला शाह साहब, वही आयत माशाअल्लाह आपके यहाँ मिंबर पे लिखी है। मेरे पीछे देखें, सूरत उल-हaq, here on the side, Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad wattaqullah innallaha khabirun bima ta'malun. Allah says, oh you who believe, fear Allah and let every soul see what it has set forth for tomorrow. And fear Allah, indeed Allah knows all that you do. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, all believers. So the khitab is to me and you. Allah is speaking to us. Allah is addressing the believers. And the first command he gives in this ayat is, Ittaqullah. Allah से डरो, तक़वा इख्तियार करो, परहेजगारी वाली जिंदगी गुजारो, अल्लाह के फरामीन पर अमल पैरा हो जाओ, अल्लाह को मानो, अल्लाह की मानो। आज मेरा और आपका रमिया क्या है? अल्लाह को तो मानते ही अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह, लेकिन अल्लाह की हम कम मानते हैं। रमजान मुबारक आता ही इसलिए कि हमें याद दहानी कराई जाए कि हमेशा अल्लाह की माननी है, हर हाल में, हर सूरत में, हर आज, हर लम्हा। A Muslim doesn't pick and choose. A Muslim, practicing Muslim, follows his deen blindly. He doesn't question any ruling of Islam. He knows whatever guidance Allah has given him, Rasulullah has given him or her, is for their own betterment, for their own benefit. So here Allah commands, Ittaqullah wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. हर नफ्स ये देखे कि मैंने कल के लिए आगे क्या भेजा। जब आप सफर करते हैं ना, पाकिस्तान जाते हैं, मदीना शरीफ जाते हैं, मक्का शरीफ जाते हैं, कहीं और का सफर करते हैं। आज मैं मैनचेस्टर से आपके ब्रायरफील्ड आया, सफर किया ना आपने। जब इंसान सफर करता है तो पहले क्या करता है? तो सफर के लिए तैयारी करता है ना, लवाजिमात जो भी जरूरियात होगी पेश नजर वो अपने हिसाब से तैयारी करता है। So we as Muslims need to be reminded, we are all travelers, we are all on a journey. We are not here for good. Nobody is here for good. Baqa and eternity is only and only for Allah. Only Allah lives forever. Only Allah lives forever. Allah has no beginning. Allah has no end. We have a beginning, we have an end. But the end that we name as maut, death, is not the actual end. For a Muslim, it is the beginning of the next life. Now we are in Alam Ajsam, the world of the body. Then we go to the Alam Barzakh. We come from the Alam Arwah. Then we have the Alam Akhirat. Alam Akhirat, the hereafter, the next life. So we are all travelers. We are all on a journey. So listen to what Allah says in the Quran. Wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. Ghadun in Arabic means tomorrow. For example, today is Sunday. So tomorrow is Monday. So is that what Allah is telling us? Is that the tomorrow referred to in the Quran? No. Here tomorrow refers to the next life. कि आने वाली जिंदगी के लिए तुमने आगे क्या भेजा है, क्या तैयारी की है, क्या प्रिपरेशंस किए हैं। हर इंसान को चाहिए कि अपने ग़रीबान में झांके और देखे। 2 दिन की ये जिंदगी है, आज हैं कल नहीं होंगे। इस छोटी सी जिंदगी के लिए हम क्या कुछ नहीं करते, कितनी दौड़ धूप करते हैं। We are all economic migrants to this country. Our fathers or grandfathers, they came to this country for what? Dunya, mal, pounds. Alhamdulillah. Now that we are settled in this country, subhanallah, beautiful masajid like this masjid, many beautiful sadat and ulama kiram, alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed us with. So now we need to remind ourselves, my dear elders, brothers, sisters, youngsters, also prepare for the next life, the hereafter. किसी अल्लाह वाले से पूछा गया, हज़रत कोई नसीहत कीजिए, कोई गोल्डन रूल अता करें कि हम जिंदगी कैसे गुजारें। तो आपने फरमाया कि इस दुनिया के लिए उतनी ही मेहनत और तगो-दो करो जितना तुमने यहां जीना है, और आखिरत के लिए उतनी मेहनत और तगो-दो करो जितना तुमने वहां जीना। यहां कितना जिएंगे हम? 70 साल, 80 साल, 90 साल, बहुत कम है जो 100 तक पहुंचेंगे, शायद ही कोई पहुंचे। और वहां कितना रहना है? खालिदीन फीहा अबदा, never ending life. You live for good, you live forever and ever. So prepare for this dunya as long as you will live here, and prepare for the hereafter for as long as you will live in the next life. So it's all about preparation, getting yourself ready, make niyat with ikhlas and sincerity that Allah make it the best Ramadan of our lives. Well, nafsum ma qaddamat lighad. The next verse of the Quran are wattaqullah. कहो सुभान अल्लाह। अब गौर करें, इसी आयत में अल्लाह ने 2 बार एक ही हुक्म दिया। अल्लाह तबारका व तआला अगर कोई बात एक बार ही कह दे तो काफी है या नहीं? अगर अल्लाह किसी बात को सिर्फ एक बार कह दे, मिसाल के तौर पर मैं आपको हवाला देता हूं कुरान पाक से ही। 5 pillars of Islam: शहादा, सला, ज़का, हज, sawm and hajj. How many times has Allah told us in the Quran that you must fast? Oh believers, you must fast. Only once. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam. Oh believers, fasting has been made obligatory upon you. Only once Allah tells us in the Quran Majid. And that makes it a pillar of our deen. अल्लाह कोई बात एक बार भी कह दे तो बहुत है, क्योंकि कहने वाला रब है, अल्लाह है, खालिक है, मालिक है, उसकी हर बात में बहुत वक्त है। Only once is more than enough. More than enough, because he is speaking to us. But here, my brothers, apart from the hundreds of other muqamat in the Quran, the same order he gives us 2 times in this one ayah. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah wal tanzur nafsum ma qaddamat lighad wattaqullah. The word ittaqullah 2 times. Take it for yourself. Here on the minbar, on the mihrab. Fear Allah. Allah se daro. Allah se daro. Allah se daro. Hundreds of times in the Quran. And you will truly benefit from your deen, from Quran and Sunnah, from the guidance of Allah, when you are a man of taqwa. When you really possess taqwa, when you desire Allah increases you in your taqwa, in your piety, in your obedience. Doesn't the Quran say, Alif Lam Mim, Dhalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fihi, Hudan lil Muttaqeen. Hudan lil Muttaqeen. Those who truly benefit from the Quran are the Muttaqoon, are those who possess taqwa. हर हाल में अल्लाह से डरता है, हर हाल में अल्लाह की मानती है, दिन में भी, रात में भी, मजमे में भी, तन्हाई में भी। आज हमारा बहुत बड़ा एक अलमिया क्या है कि हम जब पब्लिक में होते हैं तो बहुत माशाअल्लाह सूफी साहब नजर आते हैं और न जाने क्या क्या नजर आते हैं, लेकिन जब तन्हाई में हो, असल में इम्तिहान तभी होता है ना, तन्हाई में जब कोई नहीं देख रहा है, ना बीवी है, ना बच्चे हैं, ना भाई है, ना बहन है। What is your attitude at that time? How do you behave? What do you get up to? What do you do? That's the question you need to ask, because even though nobody else may be knowing what you are doing, a Muslim believes Allah sees. Allah is Alim. Allah is Khabir. Allah is Basir. Nothing is hidden from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So this is real taqwa. This is real taqwa. That is why you find in the Quran when Allah speaks about fasting, what does he say? Kutiba alaykumus siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. La'allakum tattaqun. Same word, taqwa. So that you become more obedient, कि कहीं तुम्हें परहेजगारी मिले, इस नियत से रोजा रखो, इसलिए भूख बर्दाश्त करो, प्यास बर्दाश्त करो, हुकूक ज़ौजैन से उस वक्त बचो कि कहीं तुम्हें परहेजगारी मिले, कि तुम ज्यादा मुत्तकी बनो. You are more aware of your Creator. You come closer to your Lord. You become more obedient to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So Ramadanul Mubarak undoubtedly is a very, very blessed month that Allah grants to the Ummah. And we make And we make dua, inshallah, that Allah gives us tawfiq to make it the best Ramadan of our life so far. Because there is always room for improvement. Nobody can say, I've reached the apex and the peak of all goods that I can possibly do. No, there is always room for improvement. आप कितने ही मुत्तकी हैं, परहेजगार हैं, सूफी साहब हैं, अल्लाह वाले हैं, लेकिन मजीद बेहतरीन मुमकिन है आप और मजीद अल्लाह के करीब हो सकते हैं। कुरान पाक में जहां अल्लाह तबारक व तआला ने रमजानुल मुबारक का जिक्र किया, you all know the 12 Islamic months, 12 Islamic months. नारे तकबीर, नारे रिसालत, नारे रिसालत। 12 Islamic months, lunar months. Inna iddat ash-shuhur inda Allah 12 shahra. Allah says in the Quran, indeed the number of months with Allah unto Allah are 12. 12 months. You know, one of the beauties of the month of Ramadan and its significance and merit is that apart from Ramadanul Mubarak, no other Islamic month is mentioned by name in the Quran Majid. What's the first Islamic month? मेरी मदद करें, सबसे पहला कौन सा महीना इस्लामी? मुहर्रम, सफर, रबीउल अव्वल, रबीउल आखिर, जुमादल उला, जुमादल उखरा, रजब, शाबान, रमजान, शव्वाल, जुल्कादा, जुल्हिज्जा. All very special, all months of Allah, but you don't find any other month mentioned by name in the Quran Majid. No other month is mentioned as a month in the Quran. The only month is Ramadan. Only month, not even Rabiul Awwal Sharif, not even Zulhijjah as a month. Only Ramadan. What does Allah say? Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. Look how Allah introduces the month of Ramadan. किस हवाले से अल्लाह ने इसका जिक्र फरमाया कि रमजान वो महीना है जिसमें कुरान नाजिल किया गया। क्या आपस में कुरान और रमजान का रिश्ता है? इसको समझें। You can't separate the two. Inseparable. Ramadan, Quran, Lazim Malzoom. We have revealed the Quranul Majid in the month of Ramadan. So what do we do as Muslims? Increase our relationship with the Quranul Majid. Quranul Majid जितना हो सके ज्यादा से ज्यादा हमने पढ़ना है, हमने समझने की कोशिश करना है, और सबसे बढ़कर यह कि हमने उस पर अमल करना है। अल्लाह ने नाज़िल इसलिए फरमाया ना कि आप सीखें और उस पर अमल करें। एक्शंस, डीड्स, अमाल, that count. So Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala tells us in the Quran Majid, Ramadan is the month of the revelation of Quran Majid. कसरत से कुरान शरीफ पढ़ना। कुरान पाक को आप सामने रख लें, देखिए मेरे सामने पढ़ा है, मेरे सामने रखा है, पढ़ा नहीं करना चाहिए, मेरे सामने कुरान शरीफ रखा है। हम इसको बस देखते रहे कि अल्लाह की किताब है, देखना भी इसकी इबादत है, इसको देखना भी इसका अदब एहतराम भी इबादत। पढ़ना तो सोने पे सुहागा, सुभान अल्लाह। Every letter that you read, Allah grants you minimum 10 virtues. 10 sawab for every letter that you read, whether you understand or you don't understand. And when the Prophet said this, he gave the example of the abbreviated letters, Alif Lam Mim. क्या मतलब है कि समझ ना भी आए, कुरान पढ़ोगे, अल्लाह हर हर्फ के बदले तुम्हें 10 सवाब अता फरमाएगा। पढ़ के पढ़ेंगे, समझ के पढ़ेंगे तो सुभान अल्लाह, सोने पे सुहागा। जितना हो सके अपना रिश्ता कुरान से मजबूत करें। We are alhamdulillah Sunni Hanafi Muslims. We are followers and muqallid of Sayyidina Imam Azam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu ta'ala. It is mentioned in many works, including Bahar Shari'ah, that Hazrat Sayyidina Imam Azam Abu Hanifa radiyallahu ta'ala का मामूल ये था कि आप हर रमज़ानुल मुबारक में 61 मरतबा मुकम्मल कुरान शरीफ पढ़ें। 61 means 61. I am also alhamdulillah hafiz al-Quran. It's not possible for me. I know it's not possible. यहाँ और भी हुफ़ाज़ किराम मौजूद होंगे, हमारे लिए मुमकिन नहीं है। कोई जब सुनेगा कि 61 मरतबा पढ़ते थे तो मतलब है कुछ और करते नहीं थे। ज़हन में आ सकती है उसकी बात? इसका मतलब है he did nothing else but read the Quran. No. सैयदना इमाम आज़म अबू हनीफा रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु एक बहुत कामयाब ताजिर भी थे। बहुत बड़ा कारोबार था, बहुत बड़े उस्ताद थे। सुबह से लेकर शाम तक अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह मशगल यही पढ़ना और पढ़ाना, ये उनकी करामत थी। ये वो कर सकते, हमारे पास की बात नहीं है। I gave you this example so that we also have the desire and understanding of increasing ourselves in terms of our connection with the Quran Majid. Quran Majid, यहाँ अब्दुल्ला शाह साहब मौजूद हैं। ये शिफाउल हक शाह साहब, माशाअल्लाह शाह साहब शिफाउल हक है। कुरान मजीद beginning to end is Shifa. Every word, every letter of the Quran Majid is Shifa. There is healing, there is remedy, there is medication in the Quran Majid. وَيَشْفِي صُدُورَ قَوْمٍ مُؤْمِنِينَ وَشِفَاءٌ لِمَا فِي الصُّدُورِ يَخْرُجُ مِنْ بُطُونِهَا شَرَابٌ مُخْتَلِفٌ أَلْوَانُهُ فِيهِ شِفَاءٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ قُلْ هُوَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا هُدًى وَشِفَاءٌ. पूरा कुरान शिफा है, शिफा। इसमें अल्लाह ने शिफा रखी है, ज़ाहिरी और बातिनी, रूहानी और जिस्मानी। सरकार ने फरमाया सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, खैरुद दवाइल कुरान, the best medication and remedy is the Quran Majid. सबसे बेहतरीन दवा कुरान मजीद है। इससे अपने रिश्ते को मजबूत करें, खुद भी पढ़ें, घर में भी माहौल बनाएं, घर में भी माहौल बनाएं। हम सुन्नियों में एक बहुत बड़ी कमजोरी है, बहुत बड़ी एक बीमारी है, कमजोरी कहने कि हम लोग अक्सर हमारा कुरान मजीद दुरुस्त नहीं होता। अवाम तो अवाम है, मैं खवास की बात कर रहा हूं। दूसरों के आप चले जाएं, अभी लास्ट वीक की बात है, वेंसडे की बात है। मैं एक नौजवान के साथ एक प्रोग्राम में गया था। कहां था प्रोग्राम मुझे भी याद नहीं आता। तो रास्ते में उसने है, हमारा सुन्नी नौजवान है, सुन्नी नौजवान है, लेकिन कहता है हज़रत मैं खुदा मस्जिद में गया तो वहां वो इतना खूबसूरत कुरान, इतना खूबसूरत, सुनते रहो, सब घूमते रहो। तो हमारे यहाँ ये कमजोरी है। हमें चाहिए कि कुरान मजीद को तजवीद के साथ, उसूल के साथ, किरात के साथ, तरतील के साथ अपने असातिज़ा से सीखें। कुरान में एक जज्ब है, एक कैफियत है, एक सुरूर है। सही तौर पे पढ़ा जाए तो सुभान अल्लाह, क्या बात है। कई नॉन मुस्लिम्स सिर्फ कुरान सुनकर अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह मुसलमान हैं। So many non-Muslims are becoming Muslims only on the basis of listening to the Quran. मुझे याद आ रहा है 10-15 साल पहले की बात है, विक्टोरिया पार्क मस्जिद, I had the head of the languages department from Manchester University, Dr. John Morley. Dr. John Morley. He is the head of the languages department of Manchester University. वो आया, दोस्तों ने मुझसे मुलाकात कराई, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह बातचीत हुई और वो कहता मैं इस्लाम में दाखिल होना चाहता हूँ, मुझे मुसलमान कलमा पढ़ा दे। मैंने पूछा, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह कलमा पढ़ाया मैंने, what is the reason of your conversion? Why you reverted to Islam? And one reason he gave out of two. He said, because once I was traveling on the plane and I was speaking through the channels, and the plane, and on one channel the Quran was being recited. कुरान पाक को सुनकर उसने मेरे दिल में घर कर लिया। मैं इतना मुतासिर हुआ, बाद में मैंने मालूम किया तो मुझे बताया कि ये मुसलमानों की किताब है। कुरान सुनकर भी अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह लोग दायरे इस्लाम में दाखिल हो गए। हमें चाहिए कि हम कसरत से कुरान पाक से अपना रिश्ता मजबूत करें, खुद भी पढ़ें, औलाद को भी पढ़ाएं, और सबसे बढ़कर ये कि उसको समझने की कोशिश करें। अल्लाह ने हमें क्या हिदायत दी है, क्या गाइडेंस दी है, और फिर उस पर अमल करने की भी सही करें। अल्लाह ताला मुझे भी आपको भी तौफीक अता फरमाए। व आखिरु दावाना अनिल हम्दुलिल्लाहि रब्बिल आलमीन।
MashaAllah, MashaAllah, a beautiful reminder by Allama Arshad Misbahi Syed about how to prepare for Ramadan, the importance of Ramadan, and especially the importance of Quran. As Hazrat mentioned, that when you recite the Quran, for each letter you get minimum of 10 beats, and in Ramadan, according to some narrations, this is multiplied by 70. So for each letter you could be getting 70 good deeds, and that's more of a reason to connect with the Quran in Ramadan. MashaAllah, a beautiful way of speaking of Hazrat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him in his ilm, in his amal, and in his age as well. Next, inshallah, I would like to invite our student. You heard him recite the Quran beautifully. He was supposed to read this read this poem of his in our award ceremony that we had not so long ago. But unfortunately, there wasn't some time, and because he worked so hard on it, I thought, we should give him a few minutes today, inshallah. So, in our Gateway to Scholarship classes, alhamdulillah, the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been, the core of our studies. Over a year now, alhamdulillah, our students have studied the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a lot of detail. The life of Rasulullah, the story from birth up until the apparent demise, up until the apparent passing of Rasulullah, and then the shama'il and the khasail of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then I told one of our students to write a poem about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, and the student, mashallah, he did a fantastic job. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. So I would like to invite Brother Hassan Nawaz to come and recite the poem in praise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Nara takbir, Nara takbir, Nara risalat, Nara tahqiq, Nara hadari.
Look for our Rasulullah. The heart softened in the presence of your beloved name. They moisten with love for you, O my beloved. We cry with time, all in undoubted shame, for what we have become, my true Syed. It is you, O Rasulullah, who led us in the great battle of Badr. For you are the greatest of leaders, leading the noble companions and angels into battle. We have heard that death is a painful experience. But what if I told you, O my beloved, that I look forward to such an inconvenience? For I will finally be able to cast my eyes on you, the healer of all my grievance. Bless me with the honor of Abu Ayyub, in whose house you stayed, his invitation you did not refuse. If I'm not worthy of this physically, do bless me in my dream, for separation from you makes me want to scream. No night is sweet without you, like the moon hungers for the night, and the sun longs for the day. I yearn for you, O my beloved, that one day I embrace you tight. My love for you cannot be concealed. If you dug into my heart and gazed across the walls, there it would all be revealed, your beautiful names carved across a wall. Your words emit a fragrance that scar the ears of those who it touches. The way you inspire with such competence, you have no equivalence. 12th of Rabi al-Awwal, a blessed day compared to none. the birth of the Al-Mustafa, the chosen one. You are swaying in your cradle, rocked by angels, protected by all of the world's dangers. The cave of Hira, where you will spend days in seclusion, worshipping Allah in solitude, protected from all this world's delusion, getting rid of all doubts and confusion. Engrossed in worship were you again, Sayyidina Jibreel appeared before you. Iqra, he urged you to proclaim then, however you replied, I'm not going to do. A firm embrace, given thrice, and released from your blessed mouth, was the first revelation, breathtaking and concise. O Rasulullah, you have been given the greatest of features, the greatest of character, Ash-Shama'il, the greatest of attributes, Al-Khasaya, as you are the most outstanding, Al-Fadil. You are the leader of both worlds and both creations. Your words are cures to all coming generations, inspiring all and building civilizations. You were the seal of prophethood and the sealer of my heart, securing all my love for you, protecting it from falling apart. The distance aches every day, hearing about you isn't enough. But rest assured, I hear you say, you will be with those whom you love.
But there's a bit of encouragement, inshallah, won't tire you. So if everyone can say Subhanallah. Subhanallah. A bit louder please, Subhanallah. Subhanallah. MashaAllah. In the poem, you might have heard many references to the seerah, many different events and many different key events of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that shows you that this brother, mashallah, he has studied the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and expressed his love for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And therefore, when youngsters like this are performing, and when these guys are writing poems and praising and reciting the Quran, we should encourage them. We should say subhanallah and mashallah so that they want to do better and they want to perform better in their study of Islam. So one final time, everyone say subhanallah. Subhanallah. Everyone say mashallah. Okay, my brothers, I won't waste much of your time. Our next speaker is obviously the main speaker of today, Hazrat Shaykh Asrar Rashid. And Shaykh Asrar Rashid, mashallah, I don't think I need to introduce the Shaykh. Everyone is aware. One thing I will mention though, this is for encouragement for our students that are sat here and the youngsters over here who are very easily, inspired by entertainers. Shaykh Asrar Rashid, mashallah, whenever any fitna has transpired or occurred within the UK, Shaykh Asrar Rashid, we have found him to raise his voice. Whether that is in terms of theology or beliefs, like when the Shias and the Devbandis and others with their beliefs, when they created issues, or whether it's in terms of atheism or Christianity, you will find that Shaykh Asrar Rashid Hafizahullah has debated all of them. And mashallah, he has always kept them busy and kept them on their toes. And even in terms of social issues, the social issues that we face now, in terms of LGBT, in terms of the currency, the inflation and everything, you will find that Shaykh Asrar Rashid Hafizahullah, he is up to date, and Shaykh Asrar Rashid Hafizahullah, he's always guiding us, and always raising his voice, without any fear. And so we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserves the Shaykh. We make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them a long life and allows us to benefit from the Shaykh as well. So without any further ado, Shaykh Asrar Rashid sahib, inshallah, to speak upon living in the end of times, and the topics include modern schooling system. We are all aware of LGBT topics that are introduced into our schools, and other issues among atheism and the behavioral issues that are occurring because of these schools. So I would now like to invite Shaykh Asrar Rashid sahib to come and talk, give us a talk on this topic. Narai Takbir. My brothers, Shaykh sahib has come all the way from Birmingham. It's a 3-hour drive. so we can, a bit of, excitement, please. Nara Takbir, Nara Takbir, Nara Risalat, Nara Tahqiq, Nara Haydar.
سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد طب القلوب ودوائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكرك الغافلون. Today's subject, living in the end of times. For no doubt, we do live in Akhir al-Zaman, in which the Ashrat al-Sa'a increased, the signs of the end of times increased, both in their occurrence and in their intensity, as well as the fact that Ashrat al-Sa'a, the signs of the end of times, are a proof for the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah ta'ala states that no sign occurs except it is a proof of prophethood, and those signs occur in every time, in every age. And the day and age that we live in, those Ashrat al-Sa'a, the signs of the end of times, are occurring in front of us and will continue to occur with intensity. But living in the end of times entails, firstly, we would have to deal with the problem of cost of living. Cost of living in Arabic is known as al-ghala. Al-ghala is when the markets fail, and after the markets fail, you have an increase of prices, that the prices go up. So today in the world that we live in, the prices have gone up. Generally speaking, the modern financial system, what they do is that they evaluate the prices by checking the prices on around 200 to 300 products, everyday products. If the prices go up in all of these products, or most of those products, they tell you the level of inflation. Some people may not even know the meaning of inflation. What does inflation mean? Inflation is the increased cost of living, but also the devaluing of the money. Where the value is less, the money goes down. So the pound, for instance, what you could purchase with a pound 50 years ago, you cannot purchase today. This is known as inflation. What does this have to do with Akhir al-Zaman, the end of times? One of the signs of the end of times, as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in a hadith, is with regard to the closing in of the markets. And the companions, alayhim ridwan, they asked, what does this mean that the markets close in? And the response was given, kasaduha. What is kasaduha? The failing of the markets. That means a decrease in trade leads to what? Higher prices. So in the past, this has happened in cycles. Every so often different events will occur that will lead to the devaluing of the currency and an increase in prices. It happened in ancient times and it continues to happen. But there is a difference today. There is a difference between today and in the past. One of those differences is that a riba usually had not spread globally the way it has spread today. A riba. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam foretold that by stating that a time shall come upon the people that everyone will be consuming a riba. What is a riba? Usury. And those who do not consume a riba will be afflicted by its dust. A hadith narrated by Imam Abu Dawud. This has never occurred in human history, that the entire globe is consumed in a riba. A riba has that effect on the markets and the prices that even the depleting of natural resources and minerals in places like Africa and South America is caused by a riba. Someone may say, how? You have organizations like the IMF and the World Bank that when they loan out money to countries, they have strings attached which entails higher taxes in those countries. When the people are overtaxed, they resort to crime. Some of them will go to poaching, like we hear about the poaching of elephants or the tusks of a rhino. This is all a result of poverty and greed. And then we hear about the deforestation in South America, all caused by high inflation and the riba, interest-based banking. They refer to it as interest, but the classical term is usury, a riba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has waged war against the riba. So the result of a riba is such that those countries are affected to the point that some countries will over-farm the land. What that leads to is erosion of the soil. When you over-farm the same land again and again, it leads to erosion of the soil. Erosion of the soil leads to bad crops. The crops fail. When the crops fail, it leads to high prices because there is no local crops, no local wheat, no local barley. They need to import everything. And when you increase imports, that increases the prices. Sometimes imports are cheap because some countries will overproduce, and when they have surplus, they send that surplus out to other countries for cheap. That also harms an economy. How does that harm an economy? It harms the economy because the local farmers then cannot sell their produce because cheap imports are coming in. But in the Akhir Zaman, the proliferation of a riba is one of the main reasons for what inflation. This is why the inflation today is different to the inflation hundreds of years ago. The inflation hundreds of years ago would have had its own reasons, but the inflation today, why your gas prices are gone high, why your electric prices have gone high, is different to inflation decades ago even. So, from Ashratu Sa'a, from the signs of the end of times, is high costs and the failing of the markets, to the point that when the markets fail, this affects countries, and it affects them in such a way that recently, for instance, Pakistan took 200 million for what they refer to as gender rights. Now they took 200 million for gender rights. This even led the television channel ARY Digital to make a clip to promote LGBT rights in Pakistan, or an understanding of LGBT. But why would a country like Pakistan feel the essential need to do so? It is because it is under debt. Why is that country under debt? it is under debt because that country has taken interest-based loans, usually based loans from the IMF, to the point that the interest is so great that the mathematical, numerical value of the interest becomes almost impossible to pay back. This even happened to the Ottoman Caliphate from the time of Sultan Mahmud II. That was the cause of the downfall of the Ottoman Caliphate. In 1839 he passed away, but in that time he took interest-based or usury-based loans. That led, it was a spiral effect. It led to the downfall of the Ottoman Caliphate all the way up to 1908, at the removal of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, rahimahullah. And then in 1924, where you had the formal abolition of the Caliphate. That was a series of events that was caused by interest-based usury. The loans were taken to construct a railway from Vienna all the way to Istanbul, to make a 7-day journey into a 48-hour journey. To construct that railway, interest-based loans were taken. When they were unable to pay off the loans, this led to many of the tanzimat, the reforms within Ottoman law, which included the abolition of the jizya tax on the minorities and the Christians and the Jews. The abolishment of the jizya led to revolt on the part of the minorities, because the jizya protected them. The jizya protects the Christians and the Jews because it's a small tax, and in response to that tax, the caliphate protects them. But when the tax was abolished, higher taxes were placed on the people. A Western-style bureaucratic system was superimposed upon the populations of the Islamic Caliphate, which led to its eventual downfall. A bureaucratic system that initially the land belonged to the Khalifa. What does that mean? It belongs to the people. Because the Baytul Mal, the land is under the ownership of the Baytul Mal, and the beneficiaries of the land are the people. But when the law was changed to a Western democratic style law, this meant that private ownership is superimposed on the population. Private ownership means that people are free to do what they want, which includes exploitation. So the world that we live in today is exploited. We live in a world of exploitation. How even the house that you own is not really your own house, because you own the structure that is built and constructed over the land. The land actually belongs to the queen or the king now. The monarchy itself is just a construct, a name for the system that governs everything. But even for the house that you buy, when you purchase a house on mortgage, you are not actually purchasing the land that the house is constructed upon, because the land belongs to the government. You are paying for the structure that is made of the land, and you are given house deeds. But even that is enslavement, because a man or a woman will spend 30 to 40 years in some cases paying off their mortgage. By the time their mortgage is paid off, they become so old that they cannot even enjoy the house. And then in many cases, because the young children are placed in Western style education, where they are not taught that you do not place your parents in old people's homes. They are not taught adab and manners. They are not taught how to treat elderly people. So what do? They place the elderly people in old people's homes. So a man who all his life he works to pay off his interest-based mortgage, at the end when he reaches old age, he ends up in an old people's home. So he's in enslavement from the very beginning to the end. This is how people in even so-called Western democracies are enslaved. Because the enslavement is not only in the mines of South Africa, where people go into the mines and they dig for gold for corporations, or dig for diamonds, blood diamonds for corporations. The enslavement is not only for the man in India who pulls a rickshaw, an entire cart with passengers on the back only for a few rupees, while Modi makes the plans to send people on the moon. You have over 300 million people still needing toilets in India. Enslavement is not only in those regions. Enslavement is not only in the region of China where people work in iPhone factories, and when they feel depressed after having worked for over 18 hours in a dark environment, they feel depressed and they jump out the windows, and the factories place nets so they land on the nets. Enslavement is not only in China. Enslavement is also in Western democracies where people are ridden with debt from birth till death. You are born with debt and you die with debt. This is why freedom of so many places is not an easy issue. People wonder why places cannot become free and independent, like Kashmir or Palestine. Why can they not become free and independent? The answer is, if they became independent states, that would mean a portion of the debt is removed from those countries. Who will pay off the debt of India if all of Kashmir is freed? The fraction of people who are paying off the Indian debt, they will be gone. They will, or if they are annexed to Pakistan, then they will be paying Pakistan's debt. Because the entire globe is what? Debt-ridden today. The entire globe has debt. Sometimes some people are so naive, they see a country that is constructing tall buildings like the UAE and they think this is progression. They do not realize how much debt that country is taking on. How much money are they loaning? And the money, in fact, is only a paper currency with no intrinsic value. A paper currency, not gold and silver. And they pay the same money back to Western corporations, Western construction companies to come and construct those buildings. Using a slave labor force from Pakistan, India and Bangladesh or African countries to come and construct those buildings. And they may enjoy some years of prosperity through haram, but eventually the debt needs to be paid off. And the debt, when it's paid off, the taxes are increased in that country. So high living expenses today are a result of a paper currency that is superimposed on the entire world. You have paper currencies in every nation. The currency has no intrinsic value. And then the proliferation of riba, that every country is debt-ridden with riba. And then, of course, there are many other factors. One of those factors is war. War increases debt, but war makes certain people rich. This is why even the Ukrainian war is profit-making for the same people. People who make profit from both sides. There are people today who are making profit from Russia, and they are making profit from the West. They are profiteering from the war. This is why the war is continued. This is why the war is allowed and permitted to continue. Because some people, bankers, are increasing their profits from both sides. Weapon manufacturers, they are increasing their profits. Those who manufacture weapons, they sell weapons to both sides. So the war in Ukraine is a repeat of history. Every so often you have a war. Why is war so common? To the point that even in 2003, when Iraq was invaded, millions of people protested against the invasion of Iraq. But if we are living in a real democratic world, in the Western world, if the Western world was really democratic, the policy of war making was not democratic. People do not want war. The public does not want war. Yet they entered the war and people profiteered from the war. So profiteering from war also increases debt for nations. Because today, if you look at the list of nations that are under debt, I think Pakistan is number 3 at the moment. Even though Pakistan has never had a real war. They've had those incidents with India, but a real war, meaning conquering Kashmir would entail a real war, but they will never do that. Because then it decreases the value of the army once the Kashmir issue is settled. If Kashmir is settled, then it devalues the value of the army. You look at the Pakistani army today, every general or the son of a general or every soldier will have free education, but the citizens do not have free education. Why? Because the army is valued because they sustain the military. The military is a machine. The mega machine must be maintained. Likewise, every nation today has a mega machine. Russia has a mega machine. China has a mega machine. America is a mega machine. The greatest mega machine. And then NATO itself is a mega machine. Each one competing to construct its mega machine for dominance. And then you may have a nexus of machines which is known as the UN. The UN, a vacuous body which has a sterile body which has no real implementation of its policies, no real implementation. But the continuing war is profiteering, but it brings down nations, but it increases the inflation. So today we wonder why our gas and electric is going up. It's going up because we've had unnecessary lockdowns during COVID. Unnecessary lockdowns. If you remember when the Ukraine war started, if you jog your memories, do not have short-term memory. As soon as the Ukraine war started, the lockdowns finished, and as if to say COVID-19 disappeared. This is not to buy into any so-called conspiracy theories, but to mention a fact that the lockdowns themselves were what? A policy of governments, but not an absolute necessity. That necessity was done away with as soon as the Ukraine war started. So the Ukraine war led to higher prices, but also the lockdowns, because people were not free to trade and commerce amongst themselves. It led to higher prices. And today the war in Ukraine is being sustained, maintained for a long period of time. Why? So people can profiteer and the prices increase, they surge. So our gas prices are surging. The prices of wheat and barley have increased in many places. Why? Because Russia and Ukraine were the main exporters in the world. Let me make a point with regard to this. With regard to export, why is Ukraine and Russia exporting the wheat to the rest of the world? Can the rest of the world not grow its own wheat? The answer is yes, nations can grow their own wheat. And this is the blind followers of certain political parties in Pakistan should listen to this point, that when you become a part of the international economic community, they impose conditions. What are those conditions? Some of those conditions are that you cannot grow certain things, you must import certain things, those same things. Why? To benefit the member nations. So a nation may be told you cannot grow your own wheat and barley, even though you can. You must import, so the other nation benefits. And you must grow something else. So this is why now the Muslims are suffering. People who think it's absolutely essential for Pakistan to take IMF loans, or to become a part of the trading union, the trade unions that they have, or the organizations that gather various nations for economic purposes, that limits the development of Pakistan, not increases the development. How does it limit? The country is told you cannot grow certain things, and then they must import certain things. And then when a war like this happens, like the war in Ukraine, the country suffers. So today the countries are suffering because they do not follow the regulations of Islam. They follow the regulations of a bureaucratic democracy, a so-called democracy. So this is with regard to the cost of living crisis, which people ask about. Why are the prices of food increasing? These are some of the reasons. Why are the prices of gas and electric going up? These are some of the reasons. And these things are from Ashratu Za'a, signs of the end of times. Many years ago, I mentioned to people that they must invest in gold. At that time, some people, critics, detractors, made a mockery, saying, why is he informing people to invest in gold? He should tell people to invest in cryptocurrency. Now, if you look at the price of gold from many years ago, you will realize why I was mentioning that people should invest in gold. Cryptocurrency is a scam. How is it a scam? Only a small percentage of the people who invest in cryptocurrency actually benefit. The overwhelming majority of people are losing money. So if someone invested £10,000 and they did not remove their £10,000 investment in time, the value of their cryptocurrency has gone down. They have lost much of the £10,000. In the 1980s, there were pyramid schemes. The only difference between cryptocurrency and pyramid schemes is that cryptocurrency is a digital version of pyramid schemes. So instead of investing in cryptocurrency, people became greedy because with gold you have to wait. With cryptocurrency, they thought it is quick money. Whenever you hear about quick money, money that you do not need to work for, there is a golden rule. What is that golden rule? That it is too good to be true. That when you hear about quick money schemes, remember it's too good to be true. So people became greedy and they invested in cryptocurrency. But now those same people, they are crying with regard to cryptocurrency. They have lost out. So investment in gold was one thing. Another thing to invest in was silver. Silver is still cheap, relatively speaking. But a third thing which I mentioned was farming land. That people must invest in farming lands, and I also mentioned that communities can buy farming land. If everyone in this hall placed in a pot £5,000 per family, and as an organization we bought a farming land from which everyone can benefit with organic milk, organic wheat and barley. Sometimes people boast that certain nations are able to increase their produce, but they do not realize those countries are increasing their produce through genetically modified foods. So in Pakistan today, because Pakistan is accepting any advice that the West gives them, they accept. They do not grow organic food. So they have abandoned old style farming. Farming according to the traditional method. What does that lead to? If you had a produce grown on a farm through organic means, you will smell the fragrance of that produce. Like onions, for instance. Onions have no fragrance, but you can still smell the onion if it's organic. But people who go to Pakistan today will tell you that so many vegetables that they grow now, you cut them, you cannot even smell the vegetables. You cannot even smell the fruit. Why? Because they are bringing in genetically modified means of farming. But that harms the soil in the long run. It harms the land in the long run. These things are harmful in the long run. So even farming, by investing in farmland, when you invest in farmland, you are in the long run able to grow so many things, vegetables and fruits, even here in England, that we as Muslims, if we invest in farmlands, in fact, even if every masjid had an organization like, do you have a debt committee in this masjid? Yes? You have a debt committee? Yes? Imagine your masjid opened a land committee for the people who pray here, and you bought farmland here, and the land goes under the trust of the masjid. What will that lead to? Benefiting when you have your mawlid and the food will come from the farm. Imagine this. You have a farm, and whenever you have the milk coming from the farm, the wheat coming from the farm, the rice, even if you are able to grow rice, but whatever you are able to grow, it comes from the farm and it comes into the masjid as a waqf. Every masjid or huge masjid like this, mashallah, can afford farmland. This is one way to avoid the harmful effects of inflation today. This is something that the trustees of this masjid, the trustees of all the masjids in the UK, of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, they should keep in mind that if our big masajid had farmland, then they could farm their own lands and bring in produce. If we are afflicted with times of difficulty, our masajid can even provide basics for the people. And this is a mind child of mine that people should look into. So I mentioned gold, silver and farmland, that these are the investments that people should do. But instead of hoarding paper money, the hoards of paper money that we have, it should go into something that will benefit the Muslims in the long run. Then, with regard to, this was what was mentioned in the subjects, cost of living prices and inflation. This intertwines with modern schooling. Modern schooling today has become an issue and will become a greater issue in the near future. So many people, our ancestors have been saying from the 1940s and the 1950s when they first came here, that one day we will go back to Pakistan. Now over 70 years have gone and we have not gone back to Pakistan. And Pakistan has caught up in corruption with the West. So whether you live in Pakistan or India, or whether you live in Bangladesh or the United States or in Europe or in Britain, the world has become a global village. In this global village, people are now poisoned through a modern education system. During the British Raj, the Western education system was the preserve of an elite. So only certain people went to Western schools and became indoctrinated with Chaucer and Oscar Wilde and whoever else they read in these schools. So the general population was not infected by this way of thinking. But the elite, they would go to these schools. You just need to look at Bilawal Bhutto, for instance, a produce of the Western system. Likewise, throughout the post-colonial world, you had people who were elitists, who were educated in the West. But now, the entire globe has been enveloped by what state education, and in many cases Western style state education. That the propaganda is not limited to news, television news. People switch on the television, they do not realize the news that they watch. So whether you watch BBC, which currently has taken action on Gary Lineker for his comments on the British policy regarding migrants crossing the channel, but the same BBC corporation did not take action on Gary Lineker for his comments on Qatar, or whether you watch Geo News, whichever virus of television you watch, your mind will be infected with propaganda. Whether it's state propaganda or whether it's corporate media propaganda, your vision of the world is shaped by the media that you watch. And even if you read newspapers, the newspapers will be a produce of the ownership. Whoever owns the newspapers, the news will always be slanted. But then you have the state education to further indoctrinate people. So we send our children from 8 a.m. they wake up and they spend a minimum of 8 hours a day in school. 8 hours a day, 1/3 of the time. Then 1/3 of the time they sleep. And then 1/3 of the time they may spend on social media and on the smartphone. For the not so smart people, the smartphone, which has changed the zeitgeist, which has changed the paradigm of the modern mind. So they go to school and then they are indoctrinated with many things. When in reality, the number of years you spend in school from the age of 6 up to the age of 16, 10 years of schooling, and then you have a few years of nursery, so we will say 12 years of schooling. Many children leave those schools and they do not even have a skill. They do not even have a skill set. These schools do not teach grammar. They do not teach rhetoric. They do not teach logic. These are essential tools. Many people who come from Pakistan, who have studied English in Pakistan, they are shocked when they realize that the state schools here do not even teach grammar. So a child born in an inner city area is already disadvantaged. He has no advantage over people who go to private schools. He goes to a school which does not instruct him in grammar, in rhetoric, in logic, and then they are taught useless facts. Facts that will never be utilized. You will learn information which you will only retain momentarily, but then you will forget later. Like so many of you who read history in school, they teach you about Arthur Young and his land reforms, or William Cobbett and his land reforms, but you do not know what application that has in our daily lives in terms of economy and how that affected Britain. So many of us will learn things in school that we will never apply in real life. But today, the education system is worse than what it was in previous times. Now they have multiple choice questions in their exam papers. They have dumbed down education to the point that man is relying on the machine to write. So many of them will have ineligible writing. They will not be able to write with neat handwriting. Look at the difference between handwriting of this generation, the current generation, and the previous generation. The previous generation could write letters with the ink pen. Today, young people cannot even write a straight line because they rely on the laptop. Or they even use these phones. as if to say that the phone is educating them in school. So the machine is now educating the human. The organism is being educated by its invention. As I said, states are a machine. The education now is given by a machine, and it was further increased during the lockdown, where people were listening to one another on machines, as if to say a gadget will instruct you in your education. But then it gets worse. Why does it get worse? Because aside from confusing your mind with machines, they confuse your gender also. Some of you are told that you are not even men, and then you behave like women. And women are told they are not women, and then they behave like men. And some people are told they are neither. So it's the modern form of the eunuch, castrated men. And in between, a symbiotic generation, a generation that's a confusion between male and female. They cannot even know whether they are male or female. That's the type of age we live in. Young people are indoctrinated and brainwashed in schools, but at the same time, there is a double speak. Eric Blair, known as George Orwell, had a concept known as double speak in 1984. Is this 1984 a curriculum book today in schools? How many of you study George Orwell in school? Put your hands up, please. George Orwell in school. Did you cover him in school? Not a single hand. 1984. Double speak. Double speak is such a thing that they tell you have the right to exercise your freedom of speech. But when you enter the classroom, Animal Farm enters. And what happens if you exercise your freedom of speech? You are told to be silent or be silenced. You are reported to the headmaster. If you say, "Sir, I do not believe homosexuality is permissible. Sir, I do not believe what you are teaching me is correct. It undermines my religion. It undermines the Bible. The entire English nation is constructed upon the Church of England, and the Church is the teachings of Jesus Christ, upon whom be peace. And Jesus Christ was a person who instructed us in the teachings of Allah, of God Almighty, like Musa alayhi salam, Moses. And Moses and Jesus, they both taught us that homosexuality is an abomination, that there are only two genders, male and female. Yes, there are some people born as hermaphrodites, but if a man is born as a male, he will always remain a male. If a woman is born as a female, she will always remain a female. But today, young people are indoctrinated in these schools. And then they are bombarded with algorithms on the internet, to the point that even YouTube Children has now an algorithm that targets young children. Children as young as this are targeted, are bombarded with algorithms to brainwash them into thinking that these young boys are in fact women or girls, or the young girls are males. So they are not only bombarded in schools, they are bombarded on the internet through algorithms. They are bombarded with advertisement, because Shaitan, when he was outcasted, when he was sent out from the heavens, what did he say? I will attack them from the right and the left and the front and the back. The only area that was left was the sky or the ground. So advertisement hasn't reached the skies at the moment, and advertisement hasn't reached the ground, and we hope to Allah and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it never reaches the sky. But people are bombarded now with billboards. attempting to brainwash young children. So this schooling system, it leads to what? Moral relativity. It leads to what? A virus of the mind known as atheism and secularism. What is moral relativity? Do not confuse it with Einstein's relativity. Moral relativity is what? Is that depending in the age and place that you live in, morality and ethics change, which is absurd. So if you go from one place of the world to another, in Amsterdam today they have legal prostitution, but in Britain it's illegal. In China they may eat the fetus, a human fetus. They can purchase the human fetus and eat the human fetus. In some countries they can utilize an aborted fetus for makeup, genetics of the aborted fetus for makeup. This is moral relativity, to the point that Richard Dawkins even likens the human fetus to the fetus of a swine, because he's an atheist. They have no fixed morality, no fixed virtue, different to Al-Islam. In Al-Islam, your morality is fixed. Murder is always wrong. Injustice is always injustice. Theft will always be prohibited. Adultery will always be prohibited. Eating, cannibalism would always be prohibited. But the modern school education system has led to moral relativism and the confused mind. So this young man or young woman, they leave school, they do not know whether they are male or female, and then on top of that, they do not know whether God exists or not, and then they also leave with moral relativism. They are unsure about everything. At one point, they may believe incest is permitted, as Lawrence Krauss stated. The physicist is now outcasted Arizonian physicist, meaning in Arizona University. He was outcasted for sexual harassment. But he's a person who said that incest could be permitted. Based on what? Because he is a produce of moral relativism. So do not be surprised when you see these type of thoughts filter down to the masses, to the point that when you see someone taking a light stance on many issues, for instance, with regard to the aggression of the occupying state of Israel, they take a stance where they may permit Zionism as a valid philosophy. This is only a result of their school education system, the totalitarian brainwashing that they have undergone, no different to the brainwashing camps in China. The only difference is that it's a sweet prison here, even though you are born with debt. So widespread immodesty is only a result of a poor education system. The education system has bombarded the mind so much that many people, or the overwhelming majority of them, are a produce of the education system. Even though there is no real education, so many people say they are literate. When they do statistics, they state Britain is 100% literate. If that were the case, you only need to go down to certain areas and listen to people. When they read a paragraph, they are unable to read correctly. This is why the Sun newspaper is so famous. Why do you think so? Because the headline is bigger than the actual article. The headline will cover the majority of the page, and the article itself will be a paragraph. A paragraph as if someone has written it by text message. And this is known as journalism. The working classes imbibe this newspaper. They do not read The Economist or other newspapers. They read this particular newspaper. So, Widespread immodesty is a result of the education system, and as I said, the education system produces, if it does not produce literate people, and it does not produce illiterate people, it produces semi-literate people. A true literate person is a person who can not only read and write, but he is actively reading and writing. Actively reading and writing. You compare the levels of reading amongst the middle classes with the working classes, and you will see a disparity in terms of reading and educating themselves. So therefore, the widespread immorality is a result of a confused mind. And then you have something which is a result of that also, which is what? Mindless scrolling. What is mindless scrolling? Scrolling on the phone all day. In previous times, when people were more pious, they would scroll on the sibha. They scroll on the sibha. And then with the influx of two things, the influx of Western thought and this illiteracy, and the influx of Wahhabism, it led to people abandoning the sibha and dhikrullah. The Wahhabis, they say the dhikrullah gatherings are a bid'ah. So people abandoned the sibha and they adopted the smartphone. And then they are semi-literate and they spend all day on this. So the Wahhabi police force, Torquemada's police force of the Spanish Inquisition, the Wahhabi version of that, when they stop people from sibha and they stop people from dhikrullah and gatherings of dhikrullah, then they do not see the influx of the smartphone, that instead of dhikrullah, people are spending their time on what? On the smartphone, which I said is made for the not so smart people. That they need to always go on the smartphone to entertain their minds. This is also a result of the education system. Similarly, Islamic illiteracy. What do I mean by Islamic illiteracy? That today, if someone is illiterate in the dunya, it is not as harmful in all cases as him being illiterate in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Knowing Al-Quran Al-Kareem and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Islamic illiteracy. This is why the Wahhabis and the Shia have been able to misguide so many people. Because when the Wahhabis mention a hadith and a person is illiterate, he will not know the true implications of the hadith. And Wahhabism is simplistic. It's simplistic in what sense? That it is literalism. Wahhabism is all literalism, taking things on face value. This is why you will notice people who did not do so good in school, they will always gravitate towards Wahhabism because Wahhabism keeps everything simple. You just read a verse of the Quran. Mind you, they are as stupid as those people who blind follow peers. That's another form of ignorance, blind following peers. Another form of ignorance. This is why in the illiterate areas of Pakistan today, you have these false peers with such a mass following. They will have huge following. But those people are illiterate Islamically. They have no literacy in Quran and Sunnah. And this is why it's absolutely essential for Muslims now to increase their literacy of the Quran and the Sunnah. To increase their learning of the Quran, the meanings of Al-Quran Al-Kareem, and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wherever you will have illiteracy, you will have the clash between the Wahhabis and the people who follow Jahil Peers. Why do you have this clash? Because both of them have a symbiotic relationship. The host and the one that lives off the host, which is what? Is how, if you have, for instance, a mosquito, it drinks blood from the host. It needs that. So a Jahil Peer will always maintain a following by refuting Wahhabis. And the Wahhabis will maintain a living by refuting the Jahil Peer. But if you had the correct understanding of Quran and Sunnah, neither group will exist. Neither group will exist. That remember one thing, the Wahhabis may quote Quran and Sunnah, but they have no understanding of the Quran and Sunnah because we have the Imams, as-Salaf as-Salihun. But the Jahil Peer, he will not even quote Quran and Sunnah, he will tell his followers to blindly follow him. This is Islamic illiteracy. And then sometimes you have even the Shia entering, how they will enter a region, they will quote an odd event, and when they will quote an odd event or an odd narration, they will confuse the masses and make them Shia. Why? Because of Islamic illiteracy. In this final segment of my lecture, I want to mention how do we counter Islamic illiteracy, which is the most important thing. How we counter Islamic illiteracy is by increasing the circles of knowledge. Increasing the circles of knowledge. Every masjid should have firstly a course for Tajweed al-Quran for adults and children. Tajweed al-Quran. When you teach something like Tuhfatul Atfal or Al-Muqaddimatul Jazariya, additionally, every masjid must have a free Arabic language course. Now some masjids, they always complain, they say, how should we pay these teachers? If we have so many millions to construct buildings, we also have the means to pay the teachers. So every masjid must have what? Language courses, Arabic language. Why Arabic? I'll tell you why Arabic. Most of us here are from Al-Hind, Bilad al-Hind. Our children will not know Urdu. My children will not know Urdu. If you go to the generation after this generation, they will not even know Urdu. They will not know Pahari. They will not know any of their original languages. But they will know English. But to maintain Islam, you do not need to maintain your culture. You need to maintain your deen. Because Islam enters every culture. But how do you maintain your deen? Through the Arabic language. There are people today who undermine Arabic. I'll give you an example. When you look at the works of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah 100 years ago, when he wrote in the Arabic language, there was a sheikh called Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Tarabilisi. His son Ahmad, who was a scholar of Al-Madinah al-Munawwara, moved to India after reading the Arabic works of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah. He stayed with him, that they say, the historians today in Al-Madinah say, we never heard of him since he left. What happened to him? Why was that? Because of the Arabic language. When you do not maintain Arabic, you lose Islam. Arabic language. Because Arabic language is the language of Al-Quran Al-Kareem and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Arabic language is not only for Arabs. Because even many of the Arabs cannot speak correct Arabic. What did the colonialists attempt to do? When they entered the Khilafah, they divided the Arabic nations into various nations. Then what they attempted to do is to divide the Arabs by dividing them linguistically through the colloquial Arabic. So they said Morocco has its own Arabic, Syria has its own Arabic, Iraq has its own Arabic, so we will count these as different languages. Why did they do this? To disunite the Arabs. But many of the Arabs were intelligent. Like Saddam Hussein, in this regard, was intelligent. It doesn't mean I condone him in everything, but in this regard he was intelligent. He maintained Fusha. He maintained the Arabic grammar in his schools. And similarly, there were other Arab nationalists, they made, for other motives, which was Arab nationalism, but they maintained al-Fusha, which kept all the Arab nations united. But I say, not for nationalism, not for Arab nationalism, but for al-Islam, that we unite what is known as pan-Islamism. The entire Muslim world is united through Arabic. Therefore, it's not essential to preserve Farsi. Who speaks Farsi now from us? Even though Farsi was the language of the courts in Mughal Hind. We were governed by the Mughals, they spoke in Farsi. We do not speak Farsi. But Arabic language will always remain. And this is why when they formed Pakistan, the first mistake that they made was to make Urdu the national language. In reality, if they made Arabic the national language, 2 generations later, the entire Pakistan would be conversant in Arabic and maintain the language of the Quran. So every masjid must have an Arabic language course. Thirdly, every masjid must have teaching of what? Al-Quran wa Sunnah. Teaching of Al-Quran wa Sunnah. Have one dars al-Quran weekly, instructing the people on the Quran. One dars of Mishkat al-Masabih, instructing people on the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Learning the hadith. And this is how you will revive Islam and establish Islam not only in this country, but globally. Because Islam is a global religion. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enable us to counter the forces of globalization with al-Islam and the truth of al-Islam. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وأتوب إليه.
MashaAllah, everyone say subhanallah please. Everyone say mashallah. Okay, now we've got a few minutes for Q&A inshallah. So the brothers that have questions, if you can please come to this side with your questions, and inshallah we will ask the Shaykh for his guidance in whatever it is that you may want to ask about. I know there was a few brothers that wanted to ask any questions, and there were also some brothers that were personally invited by the Shaykh to ask questions about whatever issues they may have with the Shaykh or whatever they are speaking about online. So if you have any questions from the Shaykh, it's an open mic. You can come and discuss any of your problems, any of your issues with the Shaykh, and I'm sure he will reply to any of your 40 questions, I think there were, or more. And the other brothers that have questions regarding this topic, you are also welcome, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shaykh, you mentioned in this lecture and some previous ones as well, where you refer to the schooling system as an institution of brainwashing. Can you expand and explain why you refer to it as an institution of brainwashing?
So a better word would be the system of indoctrination and thought reform. So a more precise description would be thought reform. Thought reform is when you enter an institution, they reform the way you think and do not leave you to autodidactic learning, which is self-learning. which is what Islam does. Islam instructs. Islam doesn't put you through the process of thought reform. It instructs you and guides you. So a brainwashing means what? Thought reform.
Anyone else for a question? Brother, this is a golden opportunity to ask the Shaykh any of your questions. So if you have any questions, please do come forward. The sisters, there's a number upstairs. If you have a question, you can message on that number, and inshallah I will ask you a question to the Shaykh as well.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shaykh. My question is, what is the role and duties of the parents towards the kids in today's society, and how can parents who are not knowledgeable on the deen help raise and nurture the kids in today's challenging times?
The most important duty of the parents is to give their children time. When you do not give your children time, then do not expect the local Maulvi to reform him when he's past the age of 20. So they say, oh, my son doesn't listen to me. Where were you for your son when he was 8 years old, when he was 10 years old, when he was 12 years old? If you are not accompanying your children for most of the time, then who will give tarbiyah to your children? The television, social media and school. You need to fill in that time with your own personal time. So if you cannot homeschool, at least listen to them on a daily basis on what information have they been receiving in schools, to deprogram them with regard to the school thought reform. This is absolutely essential.
Sheikh, there's a question that we have received in regards to Islamic schools or homeschooling. Which one would you advise? And for Islamic schools, what steps can we take? Because the community is apparently not interested, and they don't show any intent for Islamic schools. So how can we establish Islamic schools? What's their importance? And do you recommend Islamic schools or homeschooling?
So I would recommend firstly homeschooling, but not everyone is able to undertake the arduous task of homeschooling. It's very difficult. You must give many hours. But if we establish schools, as I mentioned, mosques have the initiative of buying land for farming projects. Mosques can also be a springboard for a project to open schools. We have so many mosques now that demolish the old building and build a new masjid for 2 million, 3 million, 5 million. That is sufficient amount of money to open a school. So this comes down to initiative. If you do not have initiative, you will never carry out these projects. My job is only to plant the seed in the mind. It's your job now to nurture the seed and for the plant to grow. So you need initiative and a dedication to open local schools for the local children. Another thing that local masajid can do is opening tutoring in the masjid. So let's say, legally you do not need to send the children to school. You do not need to register your children in schools. What's essential by law is that your children are being taught at home. And it's not even essential to teach them the syllabus, the curriculum. It's essential that they are educated individuals. So if you do not send your children to school, then you can set up tutorials in the masjid. How? You can have educated people coming into the masjid to teach maths, science and English, and the people pay a fee of £20 a week. So if I can afford £20 a week, I pay £20 a week, and the children, instead of going to the schools, they go to the masjid to learn maths, science and English. This setup can also be done. inshallah, people like you with the initiative, when you have good men like him running the masjid, inshallah, you guys will have the initiative and you can set up one. If you cannot set up a school, then you set up the tutorials for people so they do not need to send their children to school. They can send them to the masjid. A fee can be allocated, something affordable, like £20. Imagine you had 100 children, £20 a week from each child, and if they cannot afford 20, you can give some type of redeemable price for the people who cannot afford. Inshallah ta'ala, when you have initiative, where there is a will, there is a way.
Just to let the brothers know that, inshallah, we are planning, and hopefully, whatever the Shaykh has mentioned, we will put that into practice, inshallah, to protect our future generations from indoctrination and from brainwashing that is taking place in schools, inshallah, hopefully with the help of the committee and the entire community. It takes the entire community to raise children, and inshallah that is in place as well. Just a final question from a young brother here, and then inshallah we will conclude and go towards the Isha prayer, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Shaykh, you mentioned in a lecture of yours that the modern day currency or economic system is a bubble waiting to burst and it's unsustainable. The countries should return to gold and silver coins as currency. If ever, when do you think this bubble will burst? And also, are there any books you can recommend in relation to this topic?
Firstly, I do not have the prescient power of predicting the future, unlike some peers who claim to know the future. But I can analyze things according to my own abilities, but I will not ever say when something may occur. But I would want to mention something that someone said to me prior to this lecture. They said, tone down your English when you speak because we have children in the audience. I said that the children in the audience understand me very well, and you are a clear demonstration of that. And there are many other children here that understand me very well, and they understand the message that is being conveyed, inshallah ta'ala. With regard to books, there are many books you can read on this, but before going on to the recommendation of books, Winston Churchill, you know Winston Churchill, the man on the £5 note, who was a well-known colonialist, and he referred to the Sufis in Sudan as rabid dogs. Why? Because when the Sufis launched jihad in 1898 in Sudan, Winston Churchill went to Sudan as a journalist, and he described the Sufis as rabid dogs because they were launching jihad against colonialism. This Winston Churchill, an imperialist, he attempted to restore gold currency for Britain in 1925, but it was a failure, and he was opposed by John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist. But those reasons could be cited today by people to say why we should not reinstate the gold currency. But inshallah, I will refute that some other time with regard to why it fell in the time of Winston Churchill, post-World War I. With regard to literature, there are many books. There is one book written recently by a man named Sebag, S-E-B-A-G, a non-Muslim, on the natural economy. It's a small book, very beneficial. You do an Amazon search, you'll find the book. But there are books written by Muslim authors as well, like Tariq al-Diwani. He has a book, The Problem with Usury. I read that book when I was about your age. How old are you now? Yes, so when I was about your age, I read a book similar to that. That actual book. It's called The Problem with Usury by Tariq al-Diwani. This is the book I started with. But later on, many of the ulama, they pointed out the problem with the gold currency. But start with that book, inshallah. And soon there will be a book of mine released on this also, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Shaykh, you would be happy to know that Alhamdulillah in our masjid we have the Gateway to Scholarship program over here where we have over 100 students studying Arabic language, grammar, sarf, nahw, etc. Seerah as well, and they range from 12 years old all the way till 20 and odd. And every single year, Alhamdulillah, we have an uptake of these classes of over 20-30 brothers, and we're currently in the third year of this program. So Alhamdulillah, we are working on Arabic and getting the brothers to learn Arabic to be able to understand the Quran. Jazakallah khair to yourself, Shaykh. Thank you very much for taking our time, for guiding us, and inshallah we look forward to having you with us soon as well. Jazakumullah khair to all the brothers that turned up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all, and I'm sure you all benefited. It looks like the 40 question brothers have not attended, so if they had attended, I'm sure the Shaykh would have taken out his precious time to answer them as well.
They can even ask after the...
Subhanallah, subhanallah. So they can even ask their questions after the program, whenever they are ready to sit face to face with the Shaykh, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair to all the brothers, and inshallah we will get ready for Isha namaz. Jazakumullah.
Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya 'ala as-salah. Hayya 'ala as-salah. Hayya 'ala al-falah. Hayya 'ala al-falah. Allah